Week. We hope that you all have had a good week so far. Oh, maybe I spoke too soon. Oh, okay. We hope that you guys have all been keeping safe, and we'd like to thank all of you guys for participating, taking the time out of your morning to be involved in, this is, I like how I told you guys not to mind the sound, and here I am, minding the sound.
I can also let people in.
Okay. Continuing on. Thank you all for taking the time out of your morning to come in and tune in into the third workshop of a progressive series that we have, and it will be on your role in anti-racism. My name is Angela Vakautan. I use she, her pronouns. I am one of the equity educators in the Multicultural Center, and I will be co-presenting alongside Brooke.
Hi everyone, my name is Brooke Wright. I use she, her pronouns. I'm also an equity educator here at the Multicultural Center, and I just really thank you all for giving us some of the time of your day. I really hope and look forward to having meaningful conversations with you. All right. So just a reminder, we are all online. So for a majority of this presentation and for time, we're going to ask if you all could put yourselves on mute for the duration of this presentation. We will have a portion later on where you will be unmuted and we will be in breakout rooms. But for a majority of it, since everyone wants a time to talk, feel free to use the chat. So we also ask that you please do not record this presentation. Our office is keeping a recording of this presentation, so if you want to go back and rewatch it, we'll have it available. But just because it is being recorded and we are online, we also remind you to engage respectfully with others. So, you know, just keep in mind that everyone's here and everyone's learning together. So even with the gaps in our own knowledge, we just ask that you keep an open mind. You know, you don't know what you don't know, and that's okay. We're all here to grow together. So everyone also has an opinion, which is not the same as informed knowledge. And so today we're really using peer critically reviewed data and facts to show the bigger picture. So we're not focusing on antidotes or I know someone. We're just focusing on the big picture and statistically gathered information. We also just hope that you take note of your personal reactions. If you're feeling uncomfortable or defensive, lean in. Ask yourself, why am I feeling that way? Look into maybe the origins or the biases that maybe it stems from, or just lean into it further so you can have a better understanding of yourself and why you would feel uncomfortable.
And just a reminder, so when utilizing the chat, keeping in mind that we aren't going to be recording, like the chat won't show up in the recording. So feel free to utilize the chat as much as you'd like. You can utilize it privately, directing a message to one specific person, or just sharing in general with the whole entire group.
All right. So our learning objectives today. So today we want to help you understand what it means to be anti-racist. We'll also be differentiating between an ally and an accomplice and how those serve in anti-racist behaviors. And then we hope to develop some skills to combat expressions of racism. So really putting these tools into practice. All right. So for those of you who were with us last week, we're just going to do a review. So some identities are privileged, whereas others are oppressed. So it's important to remember that we all hold multiple dynamic identities. Our race, religion, age, ability. Those are all different identities that we hold, and some of those will be oppressed, whereas others are privileged. That's completely out of our control and through no fault of our own, but it is the deck of cards that we have. So just keeping that in mind. Prejudice refers to preconceived attitudes. So these are the different strata and organizations we have in our brain that everyone has that over time and socialization we use to navigate what we're doing throughout life. So different ideas or organizational patterns we're going to follow because it will make us feel safe and comfortable. But sometimes those prejudices aren't really realistic, and they actually discriminate against others. So when we're acting on a prejudice that is not based on fact, often we can bar someone from accessing the resources they need, and it can become an action of discrimination. So racism is a system that privileges certain groups of others. So if you have a lot of discriminatory actions, that pattern results in racism. It's a clear structure where we see a certain group of people privileged over others, and like a clear stratification. So going back to prejudices, those are part of our implicit biases. So we all have these. Like I said, just remember, it's just an organizational style of interacting with the world. But as we grow and learn new information, our biases change over time. So remember, you don't know what you don't know. And so when we come in contact with new information that challenges some of the implicit biases we have, it's just important to like move forward with this new information and restructure kind of your old feelings about that. Because now you know your old beliefs aren't true, and you have more stable facts to move forward with. So with our identities and the multiple identities we have, they overlap. So this is called intersectionality, which is the overlapping of social identities and shaping a person's perspective. So for myself, I am a queer white woman, and my experience will be different from all of you. Even if someone else here shares multiple identities with me, our experiences are still unique and will be different compared to someone else's. So it's not really a comparison of what my experience is. Using intersectionality is where we see this overlaps. So my experience as a woman is going to be different than Angela's, but we can use our different perspectives to work together and find solutions. So I think if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask in the chat. And if not, let's move forward.
So before we can dissect what anti-racism is, let us first take a step back and understand non-racism, how one partakes in that, and why it's not enough to necessarily just partake in non-racism alone. And so non-racism is just exhibiting actions that aren't racist. You're doing it right now. I'm doing it right now. Brooke is doing it right now. We're not being racist right now. And oftentimes, those who partake in non-racism have this feeling of self-assurance with being okay of just not being a racist, because oftentimes people equivocate being a racist with being a bad person, and nobody likes being called a bad person. Oh, I'm not racist. I don't say the N-word when it comes up in certain songs. I'm not voting for certain people. I'm not treating people differently. And so these prefaces of I'm not, I can't, I won't, I have never, they reveal this sense of comfort that being not racist is enough. So then what we are left with is this mentality of dealing with all of these injustices that are around us by not doing anything. And this is where we can see where non-racism, partaking in non-racism, isn't necessarily enough to make the changes that we want to see impacting the system of racism. So let's dive into the fence example that we have prepared. So you move into this house, and this fence, this ugly fence, was placed there before you got there. You didn't touch it, you didn't make it that way, it was there before you got there. And in order to really dissect what non-racism versus anti-racism means, we're going to say that this fence represents and symbolizes racism. So you're in the house bored, in quarantine, looking outside your window, and you realize, dang, this fence is ugly. I am going to have to fix that fence. And you keep thinking about how much you want to fix it, but it's not really doing anything to fix the fence itself. You have family members calling in, checking in on you. Like, oh, I'm doing good, but that fence outside, yeah, my fence, I'm gonna need to fix it. So you're sharing that you need to fix the fence. So you acknowledge that the fence needs to be fixed. You're sharing their stances with other people, but sitting in the house contemplating about how much change needs to happen to the fence isn't going to make the changes to the fence itself. You are going to have to put in the work and effort to go outside and fix the fence. And so if you want to work towards more anti-racist actions, you are going to have to dissect the hindering questions that come up that keep preventing you from trying to fix the fence. Oh, I can't fix the fence right now because I don't have time. I can't fix my fence right now because I don't even own a hammer, let alone any other tools to fix anything, so I can't fix it. I don't have the proper knowledge to fix a doorknob, so what do I look like trying to be Bob the Builder? So then you try to have all these excuses arise and go up. But if you want to work towards being more anti-racist, you are going to have to put in the work to get the answers to those questions and apply that into making your thoughts into actions. And so the time piece, oh, I don't have enough time. Well, I know I'm going to have to fix the fence, so I'm going to have to give up some of my time watching anime. I watch anime, so that was the best excuse I could use. I'm going to have to do the proper research on Google, look up what tools are necessary to fix the fence. I don't have the knowledge to fix the fence right now, but there are people who are hired to do so. You go to the appropriate people, right? You want to go to the people that are paid and are certified and all to do this. You want to go to people at Home Depot, the people at Lowe's, those who are experienced and certified to give you this knowledge, which then you can work towards exhibiting your actions, putting your actions into movement, and actually fixing the fence. So dissecting non-racism and anti-racism. In non-racism, you know of the injustices that are happening around you. You know how you feel about it, right? You're sharing your stances with other people, making it known, but you aren't physically doing anything to go and fix the fence. Working more towards anti-racism, you acknowledge the hindering questions that go around, but you work really hard to fix that, get the answers that you need, get the tools and knowledge that you need from the appropriate and credited resources to then fix the fence. Is it going to be hard? Yes. Is it going to be uncomfortable? Yes. Are you going to have to give up some time when you would be watching football or when you would just be kicking it just to go and fix the fence? Yes. Are you going to be applauded for fixing your fence? No. Because you don't applaud a fish for swimming. These are actions that should be put forth and these efforts should be made. So you shouldn't expect to receive an applause for fixing your fence. If anything, these are things that should be put forth because it's not enough to just
Nikki Marston
not be
joined the meeting.
And we're not saying that non-racism, partaking in non-racism is necessarily a bad thing. We're not saying that's a bad thing because in order to fix the fence, you have to identify that there is a problem with the fence in the first place. In order for you to fix any issue, you have to acknowledge that that is an issue in the first place. But it's taking the little steps, putting your thoughts into actions to take a stance, from taking a stance, right? You're shifting from taking a stance to putting how you feel about that stance into action to then eventually try to fix your fence. Does anyone have any questions so far? No? Okay, moving on. So let's apply this to yet another example, a more recent example of Ahmaud Arbery. For those of you who aren't familiar with Ahmaud Arbery's case, he was a 25-year-old Black man jogging in a predominantly white neighborhood in Brunswick, Georgia, and was shot and killed towards the end of February. Those responsible for his shooting were charged with his murder last week, I believe, yes, May 7th. Because there was a compelling piece of evidence surfacing all around social media, causing social uproars in communities to serve justice for Ahmaud Arbery. And that piece of evidence was a phone recording. And the act of pulling out your phone to record an interaction is an example of being anti-racist. For those who are looking and not really doing anything, are examples of non-racists. Because there was evidence, that is what put those individuals responsible for Ahmaud Arbery. Had there just been a bunch of onlookers not necessarily doing anything about it, I guarantee you those responsible for his death wouldn't be charged. Because there was this meme going around on social media in regards to the Ahmaud Arbery case that we had talked about that was like something along the lines of, they didn't charge them because they saw the video, they charged them because we saw the video. This piece of compelling evidence was what led to the arrests of these individuals responsible for Ahmaud Arbery's murder. And the act of pulling out your phone, once again, is an interaction. The act of pulling out your phone to record an interaction is an example of being anti-racist, because in this specific example, it's what is trying to tear down the system of racism by not letting these individuals responsible for this murder go free, versus those who were in the neighborhood at the time, not doing anything about it. Those individuals were partaking in non-racism. It's kind of dissecting that example a little further with the really recent one. And then again, this is a lot of information, so if anyone has any questions or would like for either of us to slow down, please let us know.
So being anti-racist is part of action. We know that there's different types of way and different things we can do. But the expression and the work of anti-racism kind of expresses itself in two ways. Generally, there's two groups of people working for this goal. So we have allies, and allies are vocal against problematic existence of certain types of oppression. So an ally is going to vocally state, be very open about being against racism, being about other types of oppression. They're going to let their community know and people around them know, and they might spread awareness about the existence of that issue. So yeah, allies speak out against certain actions. So they're willing to stand up and say, hey, I think this is wrong. This shouldn't be happening. And yeah, they're willing to reflect how they feel about the situation being wrong and calling it out. They ask people with marginalized identities to justify their own learning. So they're going to be asking questions. They might have some questions that they haven't had answers, and so they'll go up and ask people they know. But the timing of this isn't always necessary or necessarily right. So sometimes they can be asking someone a question that's really personal or inappropriate, something that is generalized, and really they don't have time to answer. So they're not going to be asking questions that are burdensome. They're just going to be kind of asking a lot of questions that maybe they could be spending time to do research on. They're going to amplify the message of marginalized communities through their own lens without creating a platform for the community. So sharing hashtags, bringing awareness, these are all great things that allies do. But sometimes it doesn't set up a platform to find a solution. So we saw a lot of people sharing Run with Ahmaud, but it didn't necessarily do anything to bring persecution to his case. So it's not necessarily a petition to the law, to the justice system. While it is spreading awareness, institutionally, it's not as effective. So allies also only engage with threats of oppression theoretically and don't really engage with the realities around them. So allies are going to talk about oppression existing, but they might not be keen to see when it's in their community and where the system of racism is taking place. And they might not be able to step up and engage with fighting that. Maybe they're just not comfortable yet. They still have too many questions. They don't feel like they're ready to research. So they're not quite ready to step out of their comfort zone. But they have said something, and when they feel comfortable to do so, they will take action. So being an ally is great. It's a great first step to anti-racism. But there is ways to foster more change and to work together. So think of accomplice, doing something with another person, helping them accomplish a task. Thinking about the system of racism and something we all have to deal with. Having a privileged identity, being a part of that system, and having to interact with this, it makes me want to help clean it up. It's all of our job to work to clean up racism, especially because people of color, they didn't put it there. They're not benefiting from the system. So as a collective, it's part of all of our job to clean that up and to work together. So part of being an accomplice is doing the work of unlearning, actively combating, and leveraging privilege against oppression. So I'm not going to feel guilty and over my privilege. but I do see it as a tool that I can strategically use at times. So people might be more willing to listen to me in group settings, and I can use the privilege I have maybe to get the mic, but I can pass it off to someone who deserves to be heard and who knows what they're speaking on. So I have privilege that I can leverage and share to help navigate defeating a system. I've also tried to do the best I can to acknowledge it. So accomplices are always going to be being introspective about their reactions and behaviors around others because they know that this is socialized behavior that they're trying to unlearn. So keeping an introspective mindset is really helpful. Independently and proactively learning and researching. So having insightful research is really important for fighting racism. Going back to our fence example, when you want to fix a fence, you need to know what's wrong with it before you can fix it. If you fix a fence and you replace the boards when in reality you needed to fix the post, you're going to spend a whole day of work and still have a broken fence. You're going to have a fence with no support structures. So it's really important to do the research and know where these issues are taking place, whether that's at your job, in your community, maybe even in a larger area. But going out and doing research. Speaking of research and learning new information, later today from 12 to 2, we will be having a viewing of the 13th, which is a look into the criminal justice system. So we encourage you to do that if you have the time and to watch that video. It's very insightful and comes with a wealth of learning. So going back to asking questions, accomplices ask insightful questions at the appropriate time when they cannot find the information themselves. So it should not be the burden of people of color to educate white people or to educate other people on what racism is and how to fight it. Like I said, it's not their fault that it's here and it shouldn't be their job to fix it alone. So asking insightful, meaningful questions can really help bring together the knowledge and learning that you've worked on independently as an accomplice, and also show that you're listening, you're paying attention, you're being sincere there, you're actively taking part and listening, and you've thought about what you've learned, but you still have questions, and you want to make sure that they're answered so you feel comfortable moving forward. Because it's okay to ask questions. You just want to make sure that they're meaningful and that you can really have some structured growth with them, because that's where we see the most benefit. So accomplices amplify the message of the communities that they have learned without an expectation of credit or reward. So fighting racism is just something that should be done. This is something that impacts people's lives and their rights, their expressions, their freedom, the right to even live. So racism is a big mess that we all need to clean up, and amplifying that message, it's a good thing to do, but it's something that should be done. And so after you fix your fence, your neighborhood might not throw you a party, but that's okay. Like the fence is working and I'm sure someone will appreciate it. But yeah, you shouldn't be doing this for a reward or for self-fulfillment. It should truly be because you believe this is the right thing to do. This is something that should be done. Kind of like when you spill something while you're cooking, I know I need to clean it up because it's a mess and it's going to hinder other people, not just because I want someone to say, good job for cleaning up your mess. So they're going to amplify the voice. They're going to spread the message, spread the word, but not necessarily talk about their own credits. Accomplices also are going to step in and check harmful behavior within their own privileged community. So accomplices are more likely to step up in uncomfortable situations to say something. When they're witnessing discriminatory behavior, they might intervene and educate. A good example of this could even be just hanging out with your group of friends, and maybe one of them says the N-word. So explaining that to them, that, hey, you shouldn't say the N-word, that's not cool. Like, that's one thing. You're being an ally. It's expressed that this word isn't good. But taking the extra time to say, like, You shouldn't say this word because it represents centuries of oppression and dehumanization to an entire group of people. Um, that's a little bit deeper than just saying like, hey, it's not cool. Like this, like knowing that the word and explaining that the word is like harmful and that it carries the weight of like dehumanization, as I said. It kind of really sets it in that like, hey, this isn't okay. This is something really mean to say. So they're going to check harmful behavior within their own community. So telling your friends, maybe telling your aunt or uncle, you know, sometimes they all have an aunt or uncle who might say something that isn't okay. And being an accomplice means stepping in and checking that, saying, why do you feel this way? What do you think about that? So yeah, we have some other examples of how to intervene and check this behavior. And believe it or not, it's actually a little bit easier and empowering than you think. So we got this ally versus accomplice from April Rain. She's an anti-racism activist as well, but really just instilling that we want allies, not accomplices. We want people working together to fight anti-racism, to build a meaningful conversations and to uplift the marginalized. That should be your goal, hopefully. But being an ally is a great first step, and it's something that you should encourage other people to begin. And as you know, like the more information you gather, the more research you do, we just hope that you get more confident in battling racism. All right.
Yeah.
Great.
And just to add on to what Brooke was saying, it's not that we don't want accomplices, it's just that we want for us to be able to take that first step of being an ally first before jumping right in. And so that was just like a little distinguishing point. But if anyone doesn't have any questions, let us continue our presentation. Actually, let's just take the time to make another point. It's not that we don't want accomplices, and it's not that we don't want allies. The goal is to eventually become an accomplice.
Mm-hmm.
But by becoming an accomplice, you have to take that first step of becoming an ally first. Sorry, just distinguishing facts. We don't want to confuse anyone. Continuing on. So further reiterating what Brooke was explaining with the ally versus accomplice example and utilizing our example of Ahmaud Arbery, we have this post over here from social media from this individual. I was on my Facebook and I had scrolled on my Facebook seeing this public post versus those expressing actual actions in communities. And so kind of just to break it down, beginning with a Facebook post. If I told you that I went for a 3-mile run today, and during that run, I was chased down by 2 white males in a truck, shot and killed, for no reason whatsoever, and those 2 men have yet to be arrested, would you believe me? The only thing I was worried about today while running was how far I could run before my knees started to ache. That's called privilege, and we have a massive problem with it in this country. Running while Black is not a crime, but allowing those who continue to prey on Black lives to walk free most certainly is. And there are supporting hashtags for the movement and for serving justice for Ahmaud. And so we can see an example of being an ally with this specific example, because this individual acknowledges that not only his privilege, but also expresses his stance on the injustice in regards to Ahmaud Arbery's case, that it's not a crime to run while being Black, but it's letting those who continue to prey on Black lives, letting those who continue to uphold the ideals of systematic racism to walk free, versus being an accomplice. Like you're doing the work, yes, you are expressing your stances, but you're taking the extra step to exhibit those actions and putting them into motion, such as these individuals. And it wasn't just through these protests and walking in communities and together. There were people calling the, what was it, Brooke? I can't get the proper term, but it was like the Georgia Bureau or something.
Yeah, the Bureau of Investigation.
Yes, calling those individuals, making the choice and putting those actions and making sure that justice may be served. That's where we can see the example of being an accomplice versus an example of being an ally. Both are great. Being an ally is great. We don't want you all to think that being non-racist or being an ally is a bad thing. These are great first steps, because you're bringing more awareness to these issues. You are bringing in awareness to your stances and making it known. but it's taking the extra step and working towards being an accomplice that we can see these changes being made in these systems. And as Brooke had mentioned in the review piece and touching upon intersectionality, it is vital to keep an intersectional lens when going about analyzing and working towards being a part of anti-racism. Intersectionality, once again, it refers to the overlap of how various social identities like your sex, your gender identity, your socioeconomic status, religious affiliation, all these social identities that make you you, how they contribute to the systematic oppression that you experience, that experience is unique to you. But why is it important to keep an intersectional lens? Why do I need to be aware of like how the other identities intersect? Why? Because you can't fight one form of injustice without being against the other forms of injustices. You cannot work to be anti-racist, yet still support homophobic, sexist, xenophobic ideals or expressions. That's not how this works, because in order to really combat racism, it takes a combined social effort, meaning you have to go beyond your lens of just your social identities, but being aware of how you can work to be more aware of how others people's intersection of their social identities and how that works, so that we're able to work together. Because if you are working, referring to the second point, if you're working to be anti-racist, remember to also work being anti-homophobic, anti-sexist, and anti-oppressed identities, period. Because once again, as Brooke has reiterated, this is the responsibility of all of us. It's going to take a combined cohesive effort to really combat racism in order for us to see the changes and to therefore see the changes that we want to make and live in a more equitable society. So after receiving all this knowledge, all of these tools, and after hearing through these examples, we are now going to move on and how you can combat racist expressions in different ways, different modes. Before doing so, we have a couple tips. So tip number one, do not flat out point and scream at someone, racist, you're such a racist, you're a bigot, you're such a big racist. The reason why we don't want to automatically do that is because, as I had mentioned in the first example with the fence, people often equivocate a racist with a bad person, and nobody likes being a bad person. So psychologically, they become defensive and will not be willing to listen to anything you want to hear. And once again, you want to be able to have a progressive conversation in a safe way, rather than having things be defensive and not really getting anywhere. You want to further the conversation. You want to dissect these things. You don't want to just automatically start it and then just have it end out flat on there. And tip number two, before doing anything, you have to carefully assess the situation to be safe, so you aren't in harm and you aren't putting anyone else in harm. Now, going on into the different options in which that you can exhibit combating racist expressions. Option A, speak up. Using your voice, right? Because speaking up can be seen in like very different ways. You can speak up online, you can speak up in actually like vocally, you can speak up through different modes. But for this specific example, we're talking about vocally utilizing your voice. Asking an open-ended question like, why do you think that? Why do you think that's funny? Why did you say that? And especially in conversations when the person who has said something where you're uncomfortable with, in regards to racial discourse, sharing your feelings and sharing your emotions about it can probably help the conversation progress as well, especially if this is a person who is a family member or your best friend, workplace, like where someone is dear to you. Sharing your feelings, can help a bit and progress these conversations. Like, it makes me uncomfortable when you say that. What did you really mean? Yo, that really hurt me. That comment offended me. Why did you say that? So this is one option of how you can combat racist expressions. Now, if you aren't comfortable utilizing your voice in a literal way, like you aren't comfortable actually like speaking, we do advise you that we want everyone to speak up. We want people to use their voice. We want people to speak up. But if you aren't necessarily going down that route with that option, depending on the circumstances, document evidence, take a video, take pictures, screenshot stuff online. As we had mentioned with the Ahmaud Arbery case, taking that video was a part of a process to make sure that those responsible for Ahmaud Arbery's death were charged. That was a crucial piece of evidence that was utilized in the justice system, the legal system, to make sure that these individuals were charged. Taking pictures, making sure that you're also analyzing to see if the situation is safe to take pictures, that you're not putting the victim at harm by doing so. Screenshotting content online. And what I mean by this is that social media is a very big factor in our everyday lives. And people really express how they feel on social media, thinking that their actions have no consequences. And by screenshotting that and taking that form of evidence, you are able to work towards being more anti-racist. And an example of this can be seen with students who are in higher learning, right? Higher education, they go to a university, that are online being nasty, just very discriminatory, prejudicial, racist online. And by screenshotting those comments and stuff, a lot of students, at least I have in my experience, can get kicked out of those institutions if they don't do that again. Therefore, they can learn their lesson. And you start having these progressions. So option C, supporting the victim, de-escalating the situation by carefully removing the victim out of there. For example, if you see someone starting to get a little harsh with someone in their tone talking, and you're just walking, mind your own business, but you feel like you should help them, but don't want to use your voice and you don't want to take any pictures, you can tell them, hey, like, would you like to come with me over here for a little bit? Keeping in mind, this might go either way, but that's something, right? Exchanging contact information with the victim. So you can provide some sort of support, encouraging words, supporting words, or exchanging contact information to send them the evidence that you took. If you did document evidence, then they have that right to do with that evidence however they feel. Because oftentimes when people take videos and pictures online, they don't necessarily have the permission of those involved to post it. So then there's like privacy issues that go along. But letting the victim know that someone cares enough to reach out can help support them. And it may not cover up what happened to them at all, but it's something. If you feel as if you cannot provide the victim with the proper support, I guarantee you know of someone who does. And if they don't, they know of someone who does. So if you feel like you can't support the victim in a proper way, you can't utilize your voice the way that you want to, you might not have the option of documenting evidence, but you know of someone who is able to provide them with some proper support, someone who is certified, right? If I have issues on campus in regards to like discrimination or something, I would go to the director of the Multicultural Center and go talk and vent and how I can provide help so that way this person can support me. And that person is my boss, Vanessa. Hey, but that's just like one example. So that way you aren't doing anything, because doing something progressive, doing something positively impacting is better than doing nothing, right? So you have the onlookers versus those actually helping the situation out.
So yeah, just to reiterate, we understand that these situations are uncomfortable, and it can be really hard to stand up and say something. But just remember of thinking about other people's experience. Think about the victim and how they feel, and how this is a community thing that people will deal with. This might not be the first person someone's experiencing it. So using that, and there's just being confident with yourself, generally people are supportive when they start realizing hey, one person here is acting discriminatory. Humans are generally nice, and we don't like seeing people being discriminated against. So once the behavior is called out, generally other people might come and support you. So just being confident and using those open-ended questions, it's a little bit more comfortable for you, not only because the person behaving in a discriminatory way would be justifying their own actions, or at least attempting to. So that takes some of the pressure off of you if you're kind of nervous about it, because remember, you're not doing anything wrong. Being anti-racist is a good thing, and we just really hope you feel confident in standing up and saying something, and realizing that you're doing the right thing to do that.
Yeah, thank you, Brooke. And to kind of just to we're not telling anyone to jump into every single conversation that is involved with racial discourse. We're not telling you to jump into every physical altercation that happens. We are just providing you guys with options that you can start out, right? These are baby steps. These are steps that you can take in order to combat racist expressions. Does anyone have any questions before we move on? We understand that you guys are receiving a lot of content. This is a lot of knowledge to go about. If anyone has any questions or would like us to slow down. Okay. Practice time. So to really exhibit your understanding and really try to, put things into your own perspective, what other way to do that except for to practice? And so we have two scenarios here. Before we get into that, we like to explain how this is going to go down. So with practice time in these two scenarios, you all will be put into break rooms, which you all will be put into groups where you will have an assigned scenario. For example, groups 1, 2, and 3, you will be assigned scenario 1. Groups 4, 5, and 6, you will be assigned scenario 2. And the way that you know what group number you are is if you look at the top of your screen, I think it's to the right, that it'll say break room 1, break room 2, break room 3. So you know what group you are. And you all are responsible for appointing one person to report back to us of what you guys talked about. Because in these scenarios, we want you all to have raw discussions. We want to know what you would really do in these situations. Please do not regurgitate what you think we would want to hear. We want to know what you would actually do. And so with that being said, with scenario 1, you stop by in a convenience store for some snacks. A small group of younger boys enter the store behind you. As you grab what you want, you notice that the store clerk is following only the black boys through the store and not their white peers. Scenario 2. You stop by McDonald's and place your order inside. While waiting in line, you make sure to be 6 feet apart to follow social distancing, and you notice the 2 Asian women behind you are taking the extra step and are wearing face masks. After you place your order, you overhear the cashier telling the women that they need to go somewhere else because they're trying to keep their establishment clean and their kind is to blame for the pandemic. So, reminder, groups 1, 2, and 3, you will be responsible to talk about scenario 1. You're assigned to scenario 1. Groups 4, 5, and 6, you're responsible for scenario 2. And remember, each group will appoint one person to then discuss about what you guys have talked about, what you do in the situation, and you all have 5 minutes to do so.
All right.
Sorry.
So we're just gonna get those breakup rooms put together. We have 37 participants, and this is great. We love having all of you here, but it's just gonna take a little bit more time to get everyone split up. Also during this, the recording will be paused, so just remember, we really want you to be honest and talk about like what would you do in this scenario. All right, cool. Oh. Okay.
It was too big to put in the broadcasting one, so I had to do it in the main chat.
I don't think I can post anything.
I just did it in like the other chat.
Okay, but I can't post my scenario because like I'm in breakout room 5, so I'm not in any of my scenario breakout rooms.
Mm-hmm.
And then do you want me to just post it for everyone?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just did mine in the chat because mine was too long.
Okay. I don't know if everyone can see that.
Cool.
You know, verbal testimony isn't enough in this day and age, that we need to have video.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, the way it is, you need to have that visible evidence.
Yeah. So, yeah, thank you for sharing your answers, and those are honest, open answers, and they're great. So, yeah, I worked on writing scenario one, and one of the things I thought about doing was just, maybe trying to distract the manager, saying I need help. I mean, I feel like I could say something maybe a little witty. I often use humor, but something like, I need help because I'm confused on why you're following those boys around. Something like that, or just asking for something behind the counter, and taking their time so that the clerk can like do the job of taking care and helping customers rather than like profiling like children. So
Thank you. Thank you all for sharing again, and thank you for utilizing what we had given you in this presentation as well, and acknowledging how useful those tools and recognizing how you can use those tools in the appropriate manner. That's a great skill.
right.
Does anyone from group 4, are you responsible for dissecting scenario 2? I know that we like kind of went over it already, but if you have anything additional to add other than what was shared earlier, the representative from group 4.
I can share a little bit. I think our discussion was similar to what we've heard before, but one thing that came out was kind of discussing the pros and cons of trying to educate the cashier,
Mm-hmm.
and really trying to get a sense of safety, and if that would be a good, time or fit to do that. And I don't know if anybody else from the group wants to add anything else.
Yeah, and feel free to add. We just like to appoint someone from each group to share because we understand that we're also like on a time constraint and we are closing in on time. However, don't feel like you are forced to like be quiet. If you have something that you're like burning to share, please share. Don't go all at once now. Oh. Okay. Moving on for group 5, the representative from group 5, if you have anything else to add. Actually, both groups, 5 and 6, if either one of you guys would like to share, or if you have anything additional to add, new insight of what you would do in the situation for scenario 2. Yeah.
I'll just add, we talked in our group about that we would do very similar actions to what everybody's talked about scenario 2 already, but I did share at the beginning that just being totally transparent in this situation, I know that I would want to speak up and act, but I shared with my group that I probably, knowing myself in that moment, I'd probably get uncomfortable and maybe not speak up, maybe take action afterwards of contacting a manager or something like that. But just being totally transparent, I don't know how I would react in that situation, and that's something that I know that I want to work on. And it was great to hear my group give some ideas so that if I am ever in that situation, I can take some of their ideas and think about that as a way to actually react.
Yeah. And thank you for being completely honest. It's okay to be uncomfortable, right? But it's like what you will do with that discomfort and how you will grow from that discomfort, and the action of doing something afterwards is better than having done nothing at all, right? And we'd like to thank you all for sharing. Angelica, did you need to add anything else?
For group 6, we had different views of like addressing the issue. So we did have somebody who identifies as Asian American. So for them, putting themselves in that situation would actually put themselves at danger. And so for them, the solution to kind of help would be like recording and like contacting a manager. And that's because, again, of their identity of already being like, there's already a xenophobic like attitude towards like these like Asian Americans or Asian women, so that would be also put on them. And then for those who have different identities, were like we talked about like how we have seen those videos where people are being attacked for being Asian, and especially during these times of being blamed for these things, where we see people just step in and divert, because you can't really take the time to educate that person since they're already coming very angry and not trying to really hear anything. So at that point, you just kind of like step in and divert the situation, and kind of like distract, and then see if those the Asian women are okay. And then another perspective was already like talked about previously, but like kind of doing the scenario I just talked about, but also talking to the management and talking to them as like, if I were a white woman, I'm not a white woman, but like saying how using that privilege to step in that space and basically like not be okay, and like make it known that this is not okay. And then telling them like, you pretty much lost my business, and basically like anybody and or that you've lost my business, to kind of make a notion that not every person is going to be okay with this, especially those who like reflect their own identities. So yeah.
Thank you for that. And that's a great perspective to look upon. We'd like to thank all of you guys for sharing. And this is also, Angelica, you had reiterated, or excuse me, not reiterated, but like added on to what Vanessa and Petal shared in the chat. Vanessa mentioned, I would first try to make sure to provide care to the 2 Asian women. Petal then agreed. I would provide support to the Asian women and avoid confrontation with the store clerk. And this is important to put into perspective, right? Because it's really about being raw and like knowing what you would actually do in these situations, and working on those discomforts, as was mentioned before, working on those discomforts and finding ways to be active. And we'd like to thank all of you guys once again for taking the time to participate and really dissect and go along and how we can have these progressive conversations. And with that, does anyone have anything that they would like to add, additional discussions, takeaways from the share? We understand that we understand that we're on a time constraint and that it is already 11, but if anyone would like to share, Vanessa actually is here making a point in the group chat. We all have to be careful with recording. That evidence is important, but don't ever post it without consent from those being victimized. Exactly. As mentioned before, when going over the combating racist expressions slide, you want to make sure that you are being careful with sharing the evidence, because although it is compelling, although it is something that you feel like everyone should see this, and everyone should take a stance on this, but it's not necessarily yours to go about and share. So thank you, Vanessa, for adding that great point to make sure that we are working with consent. Does anyone else have anything to add? Last minute thoughts, reflections?
So yeah, just to remind you, everyone, we hope you see this as like, in the end of it, a team and a group effort. We hope at the end of this presentation, you all feel empowered to be strong allies and build your way into being even stronger accomplices, so that we can all work together to dismantle racism. We all have to interact with it, and the more the merrier to help clean it up.
Oh.
So yeah, centering and empowering people of color, that's vital. Thank you, Vanessa. Thanks.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just reading the group chat.
Yeah, everyone's very nice. Thank you.
Darian mentioned discussing in groups is very helpful and taught me a lot. And you all are very welcome. Thank you all. Don't be thanking us. Thank you all for taking the time to take advantage of this learning opportunity. And if anyone doesn't have anything else to say, we hope that you guys have a great rest of the day, great rest of the week, and hope that you utilize this knowledge and these tools that you have been given and applying that to your everyday lives, so that way we can work more towards an anti-racist society and live equitably.
Just a reminder, we'll also be doing a joint viewing of the 13th at noon today, Pacific Standard Time. You can find a link to that on our social media. The 13th is also, I believe, available through Netflix. So if you aren't able to join us, that's a great recommendation for understanding racism in the criminal justice system.
Okay, if anyone doesn't have anything else to say, thank you all once again and again for participating.
Mhm.
And we hope to see you all again soon. Bye, friends.